Rafiki Reflections. Today's subject is stress reduction. We all know what stress is. Stress is the pushback we get from life. Although stress is mostly unwanted, it's not all bad. Stress in a proper amount helps to get our attention, helps to motivate us, to get us started. I think without a little bit of stress of knowing that I have an appointment, sometimes laying in bed a little longer would probably seem appropriate. But stress helps us to focus, understand priorities, and attend to things that we need to do. Unfortunately, today's lifestyle is overwhelming with stress. Even a child of 10 in today's world probably has more stress than a 50-year-old man did 50 years ago. We have a very high-paced society, lots of stimulation, lots of things coming out at us continually. I saw some research the other day that said that each one of us here in the U.S. may experience as many as 2,000 advertisements every day between television and social media and driving up and down the street. That means 2,000 overt attempts to get our attention and to get us on someone else's agenda. That's a lot. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, just think about it. Anytime you miss a piece of mail, it could throw your whole life out of whack. It could cost you money, could cost you your freedom, could cost you all kinds of energy to get things right. We have a very intricate, high-paced, demanding society. But that being said, stress is really not a product of what happens. It's more a product of how we respond to what happens. We have choices. We have choices. And part of our stress comes from our attempts to control our lives. I differentiate between control and being in charge. Yes, it makes sense to be in charge of our lives, to try to understand, to try to prioritize, to be proactive. But being in control is pretty much an illusion. There are so many things that are beyond our control that the more we try to control things, the more out of control things seem, the more stressful they seem. So at some level, dealing with stress requires, to be good at dealing with stress means that we have an attitude of acceptance, instead of being totally motivated by what I want, when I want it, and how I want it. To some extent, be in an attitude of acceptance of what life has to offer. Trying to fit in, harmonize, move with the flow of life rather than against it. It's like the difference between flowing with the river or swimming against the current. One will create a whole lot more stress than the other. So learning how to deal with stress, how to reduce our stress becomes very important. And one of the things we can do to reduce our stress is to simplify our lives. Most of us are way too busy, and most of us could get better at prioritizing, understanding what is essential and what is optional, and putting more of our energy to the essentials and less toward the optionals. Many times, the optionals that we choose actually create more stress because they have consequences that may be unforeseen, or at least that we would like to avoid. So stress reduction, to some extent, is about simplifying, it's about prioritizing, it's about getting better at self-care. It's about getting better at self-care. When we take care of ourselves better, relax, nurture, attend to our needs in real simple, basic ways, we increase our capacity to endure the inevitable hits that life is going to bring us. I mean, life is going to be about bumps. There wouldn't be any point in living without it. And it's part of the beauty of life, even though it can be painful at times. Our capacity to endure, survive, and even thrive in the first face of adversity depends to some extent on how well we take care of ourselves. And we can talk about basic things, you know, proper nutrition, exercise, rest, downtime, nurturing environments, nurturing positive people, just basic things that help us to perform optimally. Of course, there are many demands being made on most of us. And even to get to that nurturing attitude and practices requires that we learn sometimes the magic word. The magic word. No. That we learn how to set boundaries, set limits. Certainly with other people who want things from us and who are requiring our attention and whatever. But it always starts with us learning to say no to ourselves. When we learn to say no to ourselves, then it's easier to say no to other people in other situations. We call that self-discipline. The good thing about discipline is the more we practice, the better we get at it. So again, keeping it real simple. A real small thing. If we are just consistent with what we say we're going to do or not do, then our willpower becomes stronger or weaker as a consequence of us being consistent or inconsistent with our word. For instance, if I say, I'll call you later, seems like a minor thing, but that's a commitment that I've made in the universe. That's a commitment I've made to myself. If I do what I say I'm going to do, then my willpower becomes a little stronger. If I don't do it, it becomes a little weaker. The stronger it gets, the more confident I become, the more relaxed I can be, and the more effective I can be in dealing with my environment. But if I can't even trust my word, that can create a lot of stress. That can create a lot of stress. So stress reduction is a science and it's an art. But like any science, like any art, the more we study, the more we practice, the more we attend to it, the better we get at it. And today's world is requiring that we get better at it. That we get better at recognizing the things that create stress in our lives, the thoughts, the interactions, the situations, and that we modify those so that they have less influence and so that we're not as attached to the results. And that's part of the difference between being in charge and being in control. When we're in control, we're trying to get a certain outcome, and we become attached to that. When we're in charge, we're moving to get a certain outcome, but we're trying to have a healthy process, and whatever comes out of that, comes out of that. Whatever outcomes comes out of that, I'm fine, because that's saying that the universe, life, the life force has something else in mind, and I can live with that. So, stress reduction. It's about not what happens, it's about how we attend to and respond to what happens. Stress reduction. It's about self-care, about increasing our efforts to take care of ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, so we can have an increased capacity to endure, to survive, and thrive. Thank you for today's Rafiki for reflection.